The government introduced two bills in the Lok Sabha Tuesday as part of its plan for simultaneous elections across the country, countering the opposition charge of the move being anti-constitutional and undermining federal structure. The constitution bill were approved by the cabinet last week. However, while most of the opposition parties including the Congress, Trinamool Congress, Shiv Sena, UBT, Samajwadi Party, Revolutionary Social Party, IUML and AIMIM vehemently opposed the introduction of the bill. As National Security Advisor Ajit Doval reached Beijing for talks Wednesday between the special representatives of the two countries, China said Tuesday it is ready to work with India to deliver an important common understandings reached between our two leaders and enhance mutual trust and mutual confidence. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi will represent Beijing at the special representative level talks. Responding to a query on the talks, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson told the media, China stands ready to work with India to deliver on important common understanding reached between our two leaders, enhance mutual trust and mutual confidence through dialogue and communication, honor our commitments and promote our bilateral relations to go back to the sound and steady growth. The Chinese Foreign Ministry statement did not make any reference to the military standoff along the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh, now in its fifth year, but focused on important common understandings and honor commitments. A reference to the border patrolling arrangement announced on October 21 and the subsequent meeting between Prime Minister Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia on October 23. Doval and Wang will hold the 23rd round of talks between the special representatives. They are expected to discuss a range of issues to rebuild bilateral ties. Training his guns on the Congress on issue ranging from the Uniform Civil Code to Constitution amendments to its stand on reservation, Union Home Minister Amit Shah told Rajya Sabha Tuesday that every state with a BJP government would bring in the UCC the way it was done in Uttarakhand. Replying to the two-day discussion in the House on the glorious journey of 75 years of the Constitution of India, Shah accused the Congress of appeasement politics under Article 44. Our constitution talks about the Uniform Civil Code. It did not become a reality because Nehru brought in the Muslim personal law. I asked the Congress, in a secular state, should not there be one law for all communities? They gave Muslim personal law to Muslims. The rest, that was common law, came to be known as Hindu Code Bill. The Congress, he said, chose different personal law but a common criminal code. If you really want Muslim personal law, then have it in full. Why is the Sharia not applicable in criminal law? Why you chop off the hands of someone who commits theft? He said. The Congress, he said, was talking about increasing the quantum of reservation not to SC, STs and OBCs, but to give the increased quotas to Muslims. And it had done so in two states. They have called for reservation beyond 50%. A parliamentary panel report has recommended doubling the annual financial assistance under the PM Kisan Samman Nidhi from Rs 6,000 to Rs 12,000 and also a legal guarantee of minimum support price to farmers, an issue that has been central to the farmers' protests in Punjab and Haryana last year. The Standing Committee on Agriculture, Animal Husbandry and Food Processing, headed by Congress MP Charanjit Singh Channi, made the recommendations in its first report on demands of grants of the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, which was tabled in Lok Sabha Tuesday. The support given under the PM Kisan scheme may be increased to Rs 12,000 per annum from Rs 6,000 per annum at present. The committee is of the view that seasonal incentives given to the farmers may also be extended to tenant farmers and farm laborers, the report said, adding, the committee strongly recommends that the department needs to declare a roadmap for implementation of MSP to farmers as a legal guarantee at the earliest. Under the PM Kisan scheme launched in February 2019 ahead of the Lok Sabha elections, financial assistance of Rs 6,000 is transferred annually to cultivable land holding farmer families in 3 equal installments of Rs 2,000 directly into their Aadhaar seeded bank accounts. It has 100% funding from the center. The committee also recommended introducing a scheme to waive off the debts of farmers and farm laborers. It also recommends setting up a national commission for minimum living wages for farm laborers to ensure long due rights to farm laborers. The committee also recommended that the government explore the possibility of providing compulsory universal crop insurance to small farmers with land holding of up to 2 hectares on the line of the center's health insurance scheme PM Jan Arogya Yojana, recommending a change of nomenclature of the Department of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. It said the committee strongly recommends for the name change as stated above, which would be vital to a larger effort to streamline agriculture governance and address the diverse needs of those working in agriculture, thereby fostering a more inclusive approach to agricultural development in India. Stating that discussions be held with representatives of farmers before announcing a trade policy related to agriculture. The committee said the committee is of the view that farmers suffer due to changing international import-export policy on agriculture produce. The committee strongly recommends that a permanent body institution of the lines of CACP, Commission for Agricultural Cost and Prices, may be created, and representatives of farmers along with agricultural experts may invariably be included in the same. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman Tuesday said that GDP growth rate in the second quarter of 24-25 was lower than expected and challenging for India and other countries, but described it as a temporary blip. Replying to the discussion on the supplementary demand for grants first batch for 24-25 in the Lok Sabha, Sitharaman said the growth rate was 6.7% in the first quarter and 5.4% in the second quarter, which was slower than expected, but she said India has seen steady and sustained growth and its GDP growth rate averaged 8.3% in the last 3 years. This number is outstanding by global standards. India has been the fastest growing major economy in the world, and the credit goes to the people of India who are struggling and meeting their aspirations, and the leadership which puts policy upfront so that it responds to people and their aspirations as well, she said. On the lower growth in the second quarter, Sitharaman said the regular union budget was approved only in August after the Lok Sabha elections, and expenditure including capital expenditure should be seen in that perspective. Sri Lankan President Anura Kumar Dissanayake at Bodh Gaya's Mahabodhi Temple, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, on Tuesday. He offered prayers and flowers under the sacred Bodhi tree. In a first for Indian Institute of Technology IITs, IIT Madras on Tuesday said it would offer 2 supernumerary seats in each undergraduate program to students who have achieved excellence in fine arts and culture starting from the upcoming academic session. IIT Madras, who was also the first IIT to introduce a similar supernumerary quota for students excelling in sports for undergraduate admission from the 24-25 academic session, 5 students have been admitted under this category. Of the 2 supernumerary seats for fine arts and culture, one would be reserved for women while the other would be gender neutral. The application process via an online portal is set to begin in June next year. To be eligible for admission under the fine arts and culture category, aspirants should have qualified the JEE Advance. In other words, they must be in the common rank list or one of the category wise rank list. They also need to have obtained the minimum required marks in class 12th as per the eligibility criteria for IITs. In addition to this, the candidate needs to have received recognition in at least one of the 9 categories of Pradhan Mantri Rashtriya Bal Puruskar, National Bal Shri Honor, National Youth Award, Ustad Bismillah Khan Yuva Puruskar, scholarships to young artists given by the Ministry of Culture, the Cultural Talent Search Scholarship, and active B grade or above certification from All India Radio or Doordarshan during the past 6 years. Artists impaneled to perform at Indian festivals abroad by the Government of India in the past 66 years. Those who have received awards in stage 4 of the National Youth Festival competition. Constitution's main task is to protect individual dignity. Can it do so in face of politics of ascriptive identities? The debate on the constitution in parliament turned out to be bitter and the partisan over whether the Congress or the BJP was a greater threat to the constitution. At one level, the process exemplifies democratic accountability. It would be wonderful if each party held the other's feet to the fire on core constitutional values. But that bluster did not give us more confidence that core institutional values will need be maintained. This column will not go into the track record of the BJP and the Congress on the constitution, but we ought to reflect on how बाद में देख रही है But we ought to reflect on how to negotiate the deeper paradoxes of modern constitutionalism. First, we need to put aside irrelevant issues in this debate. The most irrelevant is the question of authenticity of the constitution. The genius of our framers was that they did not burden the constitution with questions of faith, history and identity. It is not because they did not think these were important, but precisely because they are important. We have to create the conditions where we can freely come to judgments about these matters. Encumbering the constitution with these questions in a dangerous path. For one thing, it will make the constitution a zero-sum game. For another, they realize these questions are best addressed outside the context of the application of state or legal power. And finally, they understood that the question of authenticity is a fool's errand. Who decides the yardstick of authenticity? Is authenticity to be measured in relation to our past or our future selves? The question of identity is simultaneously too protein, too constricting and too important to left the mercy of constitutional lawyers. The core aspiration of constitutionalism is simple: the entrenchment of individual rights to protect the basic freedom and dignity of individuals, the affirmation of at least the political equality of all citizens, the creation of an institutional checks and balances, formally defined limitations on the power of government, the preservation of institutions and practices that allow citizens to exercise political agency and engage in practices of political justification for all decisions that affect their common life. This, broadly speaking, is the basic structure of any modern constitutionalism. The rest is diversion. The real question is vigilance toward all the forces that subvert this aspiration. Lack of trust in people and measuring each against compulsory identities, whether on caste, religion or nation, subverts freedom. Most of our significant assaults on free speech and individual freedom are in the name of community identity. The exaltation of executive power subverts checks and balances, and neither party has been vigilant on executive power. The fairness of the franchise, so that each one of us can act as political agents, has been preserved enough as we still engage in silvers of political justification, though both are under threat. Practices of political justification can be subverted by state power, but it can also be subverted by oligarchic power that comes from concentration of wealth. It can also be subverted by citizens not treating each other as co-agents in the creation of our collective public life, or imposing into standing just because of their identity. The Constitution rightly left questions of economic structure open because these ought to the matters of ongoing democratic negotiations, but it was informed by a sense that society needed a modicum of economic justice and inclusion of democracy to work, a part where our failures and are most egregious. The Constitution also represented a series of political compromises, the tension between individual rights and group rights, for example. But if we are to overcome these tensions, they have to be driven by the lodestar of individual freedom and dignity applied to all communities. D. Gukesh's success represents India's vibrant chess ecosystem. Gukesh Domarazu becoming the world chess champion at the age of 18 is a great record, one that is sure to last several decades at least. 18 is very young to be a world champion. If you compare this with athletics, it's like winning the 100-meter race 2 seconds quicker than others. With Gukesh's title, I must say the era of Indian chess prodigies is here. His win tells us that the chess is going to be a youngster's game. We will now see fighting chess as aggression has increased. Games are no longer boring, dry like the World Championship match between Garry Kasparov and Vladimir Kramnik in 2000. That was arguably the worst World Championship match in history. This was because the games were played only to try and get a winning position in the opening. Less than 10% of the thinking was left off the board. Contrast this with the final game between Gukesh and Ding Liren. It's 100% over the board. It is if the 14th game between Gukesh and Ding was being played 20 or 30 years back or 24 years back, when Kasparov and Kramnik were the hot seats, the two Russians may have agreed to draw at an earlier stage. But now chess has become a fight. You are not going to give in a draw to even a draw position. This is now going to be a norm because the youngsters have energy. Their physical and mental strength are enormous. What makes Gukesh stand out is that he is a very original player. He is like the architect and engineer of its own position. He thinks of a position then builds it himself. In that way, he can be compared with young Anatoly Karpov. In any position, Gukesh has a capacity to not to be forced into a draw. If you are playing for the pleasure of the game, trying to win the game on every occasion, you play well. If you think I don't know what to do, I'll try to make a draw like Ding did in the last game, you will lose. As the Russian proverb goes, the easiest way to lose is to play for a draw. Anura Kumara Dissanayake visit to India, his first overseas trip since becoming Sri Lankan president, has come at a crucial moment in the bilateral relationship. The positive tone of the joint statement could augur the beginning of a deeper economic and strategic relationship between the two countries. Part of the reason for optimism is that Dissanayake enjoys a broad mandate domestically. After winning the presidential election in September, the coalition led by his party, National People's Power, won a decisive majority in the legislature last month. One of the main hurdles to deepening ties in the past has been the fragmented nature of Sri Lankan government, making it hard for Colombo to deliver on promises. In the last few months, Dissanayake and the NPP have also done much to show their pragmatic side and assuage fear that stemmed from the party's violent past. The government has, for example, confirmed that they will continue with the IMF program for its economic recovery, albeit with greater spending on welfare programs. It is important now for both countries to resume dialogue on a free trade agreement and focus on energy supply, trade, technology exchange and Indian FDI in Sri Lanka. The joint statement also recognizes the positive role digital public infrastructure can play in Sri Lanka's development, including an Aadhaar-like identity and UPI payments interface. Addressing two long-standing issues, however, require patience and sensitivity from both sides. The first is to fishermen from both countries crossing their maritime border, as well as overfishing. This requires high diplomacy to think of the best interest of the fishermen and businesses. The answer may lie in some model of coordinated fishing. The second issue is Sri Lanka's Tamil minorities. Prime Minister Modi said, "We hope that Sri Lanka will fully implement the constitution that fulfill the commitment to hold provincial council elections while avoiding an explicit mention of the 13th amendment of the country's constitution, which guarantee rights to minorities." The volatility of the issue demands such subtlety. Dissanayake and NPP are broadly speaking Sinhala nationalist, and the government's political compulsions must inform how Delhi approaches the issue, especially because in India too it has an emotive and political background. Arguably, the most important takeaway from President Dissanayike's visit was his assurance that he will not have our land be used in a manner that is detrimental to the interest of India in any way, and the evocation of a free, open, safe and secure Indian Ocean region. The seeming reference to Beijing's activities on the IOR comes even as China is involved in developing the Hambantota port. While Disanaike assurance is a positive augury, Delhi must realize that it does not have a veto over Colombo's ties with the powers. Both sides need to establish their red lines on the matter and have a clear line of communication. That will go long way in preventing misunderstandings as well as elevating the relationship to one of the most significant in the subcontinent. Modi's visit to Kuwait, the first by an Indian Prime Minister in more than 4 decades, is an important first step in upping Delhi's game in a Middle East poised for deep structural change. Deeper engagement with the moderate Arab states demands better appreciation of their core concerns in Delhi. This in turn will involve discarding many of old Indian premises about the region. Delhi also needs to clear assessment of their hierarchy of contradictions between the moderate Arab states and the non-Arab powers of the region, Iran, Israel and Turkey. The moderate Arab states have no desire to restore the Ottoman imperial hegemony over their lands in Persian claims for regional primacy, nor do they want radical Islamist republicans to replace the republics and sow regional chaos. They deeply resent Israel's refusal to accommodate the Palestinian concern. Prime Minister Modi's visit to Kuwait this weekend will close at the last gap in India's expanded diplomatic engagement with the Gulf region that is so vital to the country's security and prosperity. Modi will be the first Prime Minister to visit Kuwait in more than 4 decades. His visit comes soon after the fall of the Assad dynasty in Damascus, whose consequences could involve a radical restructuring of the regional order in the Middle East. When the Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein invaded and occupied Kuwait in August 1990, the coalition government in Delhi was so paralyzed by the event that it could not bring itself to unambiguously condemn the fact that Saddam Hussein has sought to wipe out Kuwait as a sovereign nation from the map of the Middle East. It is impossible to escape the parallel with the Indian reluctance to criticize the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan in 1979 and the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Then as now, there was a little internal criticism of the government's refusal to condemn Saddam Hussein's unacceptable aggression by India's political class or the foreign policy elite. Many arguments were offered to suggest that Saddam Hussein was provoked or trapped into invading Kuwait, somewhat similar to the argument that Brezhnev had no option but to send troops to Afghanistan and Putin was provoked to attack Ukraine. To be sure, as a post-colonial nation, India is deeply committed to the inviolability of territory sovereignty as a core principle of international relations. Delhi has reluctant to condemn these invasions because Saddam Hussein's Iraq and Brezhnev's Soviet Union were and Vladimir Putin's Russia is a close partner to India. Many countries don't like criticizing their partners. India is not alone in financing the tension between principles and interests. All countries do it. India's problem in 1990 was not about the hypocrisy that is endemic in international relations. Part of the problem was in assessing and dealing with the geopolitical implications and consequences of Saddam Hussein's attempt to annex Kuwait. The Gulf Arabs as well as Egypt and Syria got together to support a massive American expeditionary army to force Saddam Hussein to vacate and occupy territories and restore the sovereignty of Kuwait within a year. Another element of India's problem was its well-established affinity with Ba'athist leaders like Saddam Hussein in the Middle East. Hafez al-Assad and his son Bashar are part of the Arab tradition as well. In the second half of the 20th century, Delhi was comfortable with the radical nationalist Arab republics and espoused pan-Arabism, socialism, secularism, anti-imperialism and anti-Zionism. But the Ba'athists tragically turned out to be extremely authoritarian as well. Despite much goodwill for India in the conservative Gulf monarchies and the growing energy imports and labor exports, India tended to view them through the prism of Pakistan and struggled to develop a positive engagement strategy. The relationship with Kuwait unsurprisingly, was a casualty from India's Iraq policy during 1990 to 91. It was well into the 2000s when high-level visits between Kuwait and India resumed. After Prime Minister Indira Gandhi's visit to Kuwait in 1981, Vice President Hamid Ansari's visit to Kuwait in 2009 was the highest visit. Even as the Gulf's energy, economic and security salience grew in the 21st century, the region remained low on India's diplomatic priorities. During the UPS decade-long rule, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh visited 3 Gulf countries, one each time: Oman, Qatar and Saudi Arabia. The Modi